Who had a bigger influence on punk rock? Green Day or Blink-182? I asked you guys on social media, and this is what you said. First comment, all caps. There's a bunch of poser clowns in these comments. Both Green Day and Blink-182 are in fact punk bands. Just because you don't like them doesn't mean their style of music changes. Disliking certain bands doesn't give you more punk clout. It just points out you're a insufferable tool. Thank you. It's just a question I was asking. Interesting question. Which of the two was active in the late 1980s when it was actually possible for a band to have an influence on punk rock? What's that you say? Neither? Well, then neither of them had an influence on the genre. Simple. You're welcome. By the way, are you still beating your spouse? It's a bit over the top, my man. No one in these comments understands that they sound like insufferable tools, and trying to gatekeep what's punk is the most unpunk action possible. Thank you. Nobody asked who was the biggest influence ever in punk. The question is between those two. Learn to understand the question. I appreciate people sticking up in these comments. Neither. Green Day and Blink are pop bands that were influenced by punk. They didn't influence real punk music at all. Anyone who was truly into punk might have metaphorically passed through Green Day and Blink on the way to real punk music, but these two bands are not punk influences. Okay. In terms of influencing other bands, Blink-182 would be the pick. However, in terms of leaving their mark beyond the music scene, Green Day's American Idiot reigned supreme. Yeah, that was a pretty big deal when that album came out. Nice clickbait. It's not clickbait. You will get a lot of neither are punk, which doesn't matter. Both had huge influence as gateway bands into the genre. Green Day probably more so since they were around longer. And you do not have to be a punk band to be a gateway thing to it. Yeah, I think they spoke to slightly different demographics, but of the two, I would say Green Day has a much bigger reach. But Blink, snotty vocal delivery was copied ad nauseum. I know what you mean. Oh my god, the purists. Yes, they are punk, California punk, but punk nonetheless. There's so many subgenres. I'm not much into hardcore, but I love ska, and it's still punk. Have you ever listened to Dude Ranch? I haven't. It's the perfect coming-of-age album, a mix between punk and rock. Come on, stop being grumpy old men, let people enjoy music. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Zero influence on music at all, but Green Day's first album was good-ish, and the album he did with Devo Guy was kind of rad. I mean, yeah, the first album was pretty awesome. If what you mean is which band is less of an embarrassment to real punk rock, the answer is clearly Green Day. Love how the comments section says punk was over by then. Meanwhile, there's a whole vibrant scene going on right now. It was pretty vibrant, yeah. Pretty vibrant for, like, ever. Blink is not punk rock. I wouldn't say Green Day is, too. Maybe the early music was, but they are not since early 2000s anymore for sure. They are neo-punk or pop-punk if you want. Bands like Sex Pistols, Ramones, Dead Kennedys, those were punk rock. Just because they were the first doesn't mean they were the only. Neither. I look at them as being influenced by punk rather than influencing punk. Both put in the work regardless of how punk you think they are. Both are great on-ramps for people being introduced to punk. Yeah, I guess. Which one had a bigger influence on heavy metal, the Bee Gees or David Bowie? This guy's just trolling. Just keep scrolling. That's all you gotta do. Stop trolling and keep scrolling. That better be a saying or else I'm claiming it. Green Day, it's not close. If you ask me the other question, who is better, the answer is the same. As for playing live, Green Day are one of the best bands I've seen live. Blink-182 easily the worst. I think I've actually heard that. As someone who lived through the anarcho-punk scene and still loves it, neither of these bands had any influence on the punk scene. Don't get me wrong, though I actually like both of them. Folk are so hung up on things in the punk scene, as I'm finding out more and more. The guy who was assigned by Neversoft to compile the Tony Hawk game soundtracks. Dude, those are freaking good. Tough, but I'll go with Green Day. They just outlasted Blink in terms of mainstream influence. Respectable. I saw Green Day when they opened up for Bad Religion right before they hit it big. If these are only two options, I would say Green Day. At the time when Green Day was blowing up, regular labels were signing bands that sounded like Green Day. Eventually, a lot of the record labels started shutting down and a lot of bands got dropped. Interesting. Neither of them influenced punk. They were influenced by the originals. The Pistols, Alright. Almost every pop-punk band from the early 2000s to now sounds like they're trying to do a Blink-182 impression. I think there's an argument to that. Green Day and Blink are punk? Question mark? Wow. I literally never knew. Always thought they were cheesy American pop. But then I grew up in the 80s UK. Yeah, they were definitely considered punk. You could say they're pop punk, but yeah, punk. The better question is who punk rock had the greater influence on, and the answer would be Green Day. Both broke containment and stopped making any meaningful influence on punk after achieving mainstream success. That's not to say they didn't influence some individual musicians who might eventually do something new and interesting with punk, but there's a reason punk is often mischaracterized as insular. When the music stays in the scene and not in the hands of labels and executives, it's better. Leatherface are a perfect example. Those damn labels always ruining everything. There would be no Blink without Green Day. Blink would have had the same success as Lagwagon or the Vandals if Green Day didn't blow up. Both were a gateway drug for kids of their respective eras. Having grown up in the middle of Green Day and Blink's popularity, more kids seem to be influenced by the style of dress and music of Blink-182. So did either influence punk? I suppose they made a popular punk more acceptable for radio and commercial play, and Blink capitalized on branding and creating their own brands. That they did. If you ask me, none of them. There are legends out there in this genre, which make these two pretty small. Yeah, but the question is between these two. So, neither. They're both pop punk, but both of them were instrumental in the resurgence of punk-based genre in their own ways. Yeah. You know punk rock started in the 70s, right? Well, yeah, I have a Google, so. Never considered either of those bands punk. I'd say almost an early punk band had a lot more influence. Sham 69, X-Ray, Specs, don't know how to say that. Sex, Poostox, Buzzcocks, etc. than either of these two. Yeah, but the question was about these two. Both ended up being more of an outgrowth than punk than an influence on punk, but Blink's influence has been much longer lasting and further reaching. So I think that might be a little close. I understand they're not original punk bands. But yeah, I haven't tallied them up yet, but here are the scores.